across America. Live, this is Point of View. And now, Kerby Anderson.
Thank you for joining me. It is a Wednesday edition of Point of View, and we're going to spend some time in the first half hour here looking at a couple of issues in the news. One of that, of course, is this idea of the economic D-Day against Iran, known as Operation Economic Outcast, and I wanted to cover that again. We will come back to the issue of Iran in the second hour because we are privileged to have with us again Dr. Hormoz Shariat. He is with the ministry called Iran Alive Ministries, and not surprising, their broadcast into Iran has been labeled as one that is hostile to Iran, and so, of course, I want to get some perspective from him. And, of course, yesterday, if you were listening, we also got some perspective from another particular ministry that is reaching out to Iran. Also, do want to at least make a few comments about the trade war that is unfolding between us and Canada. I have posted a piece which is critical of the president, the pointless trade war with Canada, but also bring to you some things from a few other writers who are saying, you know, it isn't exactly a non-issue in terms of the way in which Canada has benefited by limiting the kinds of things that we can sell in Canada, but having a pretty open market here in the United States. So that's what we'll cover as best as we can. If we have some time, I do want to get to a very good piece, which we've also posted by Dennis Prager. Now, as you know, of course, he has been disabled because of a fall, and as a result, isn't writing all the time. This is a column that they put out that actually had been written before, but it's a reminder as we talk about this issue of immigration that immigrants do change cultures, like the subtitle, whether New Yorkers in Florida or Latinos in America. So those are just a few things we'll get to. Bottom of the hour, we're going to be talking with a friend from the Fellowship of Christian Athletes. In particular, do want to highlight a couple of things. First of all, this great ministry of FCA, but second of all, the fact that they are establishing and have established this outreach in another country, and I thought you'd be interested in learning a little bit about that. And then, of course, we've talked about Hormoz Shariat with us as we talk about Iran in the second hour once again, and how we can witness to our Muslim friends, neighbors, and coworkers. But let's real quickly get to, of course, what Scott Bessent was involved with. This piece that comes from the Wall Street Journal, I think, is aptly titled, "Trump Unleashes Scott Bessent." Now, Scott Bessent, of course, is the Secretary of Treasury. He is an individual who used to work with George Soros, so he knows a little bit about, actually quite a bit, about currency manipulation. And, of course, on Monday, announced Operation Economic Outcast, which is against Iran and any country that cooperates with Iran. He said our objective is to sever any economic lifeline that sustains this tyrannical regime until Tehran stands alone. As I've said on this program before, but it's worth mentioning once again, there are some people that have been interacting with some of the leaders in Iran, and they have said, we do suspect that they are more fearful of the Treasury Secretary, Scott Bessent, than they are fearful of the Secretary of War, Pete Hegseth, if for no other reason than it's one thing to destroy buildings and even infrastructure, another thing to completely destroy an economy. And so this was, of course, referred to as Economic D-Day. The writers for Wall Street Journal said, well, maybe the D-Day analogy may be a little grandiose, but President Trump has waited nearly 6 months to take this economic step. Early in the war, even encouraged Iranian oil exports. So now, when you are blockading what could be the sources of income to the IRGC, this, again, which is the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, you are recognizing that the leaders and the individuals that are pushing the buttons and launching missiles and drones are really in a very difficult economic set of circumstances, especially since we've been able to swat down many of them, and by blockading Iranian oil exports, but allowing other exports to go through the Strait of Hormuz, things aren't exactly back to normal, but pretty close, and that has been significant as well. So if nothing else, what I think is so interesting is the editorial board of the Wall Street Journal said, we've come a long way. Last week's Iran's central bank governor admitted the U.S. blockade of Iran's ports had driven the regime's oil exports to zero. So that's from their own admission, whereas the United Arab Emirates also announced a halt to trade with Iran, and some of this was no coincidence. If you look at Iran's currency, which is called the rial, it is now 2 million rials to $1. I mean, it's just amazing. If you go to this article, we've posted it on our website at pointofview.net, you will see this graph that just goes almost vertical eventually. And so this is, of course, so sad that this is what 90 million people in Iran are facing, only because the leadership is so resistant to actually being willing to step down or to admit surrender. And so this is the case. But it's quite obvious that the Iranian politicians, as it says, are suddenly worried. So the president, for example, was saying the war must come to an end at some point. They were even suggesting, as we said yesterday, one of the financial ministers for Iran was saying any country that cooperates with the United States in this regard, interestingly enough, will be seen as an act of war. That I think is just an idle threat, but it illustrates again how desperate things have become, at least for some of the leaders in Iran. Finally, I just might mention on the next page, they do talk about how the Islamic Revolutionary Guard, that is the IRGC, likely will be taking a hard line, although they are really being hurt right now for oil revenue. Worse, it says it may be losing control of the Strait of Hormuz as the U.S. escorts increasingly quantities of oil. With the price of oil still below $100 a barrel, the U.S. may be able to maintain its blockade longer than the Iranian regime can bear. So this is what is unfolding there in the Middle East. We will, of course, come back to some of this in due course, because we'll be talking about what is happening in Iran, the outreach that a ministry yesterday we talked about and a ministry we're going to talk about today are having with various Christians that are in that country. One of the fastest, if not the fastest growing church by percentage in the world is the Iranian church right now. So that should be encouraging to us, but also the opportunity to reach out to those, because as we'll talk about with Dr. Shariat, they have been broadcasting to Iran for years, and many individuals are hearing the gospel. Many of them are seeing dreams of Jesus. They are being pointed to the Bible, and many of them, interestingly enough, are becoming Christians. Let's take a break, though. When we come back, my second article, Point Counterpoint, one critical of the president, the pointless trade war with Canada, and then also a second one, Mark Carney, he's of course the Prime Minister of Canada's smuggler's blues, and how Canada's tariff tantrum has a problem because it's tied to China. So we'll talk about all that right after these important messages.
This is Viewpoints with Kerby Anderson.
Yesterday, I talked about how Gen Z investors see sports gambling as their long-term financial strategy. While that might seem irrational, they are making choices about how to provide for their financial future based upon some sobering economic facts. Let's discuss a few of them. Last month, the official percentage for inflation was higher than the percentage for wage growth. Put another way, prices rose faster than your paycheck. This wasn't the exception, but the rule. Since the 1970s, when the U.S. went off the gold standard, prices of everything have risen faster than wages. The national debt increased by $2.8 trillion last year. Someone calculated that works out to be $91,000 per second. Put another way, the national debt just increased another $8 million in the time you listen to this commentary, and I should add that the national debt is about $40 trillion. To illustrate this to one of my guests on radio, I suggested we remove 8 zeros from these numbers. The federal government brings in $5 trillion each year and spends $7 trillion during the same amount of time. Imagine if somebody is making $50,000 and spending $70,000 each year, we would be concerned, especially if that person also had $400,000 in debt. To finance this budgetary shortfall, the government must print enough money to cover the difference. More dollars dropped into the economy means it takes more dollars to buy assets, but it also means the dollars in your wallet or purse are worth less. That results in what is called a K-shaped economy. The stock market is at an all-time high when most Americans struggle to make ends meet. I'm Kerby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
Go deeper on topics like you just heard by visiting pointofview.net. That's pointofview.net. You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Back once again, listen, we can for just a minute, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it, focusing on this trade war that has developed between us and Canada. There are so many similarities between the United States and Canada, but there are some very significant differences, obviously, in terms of their perception about whether or not to have a government-run health care. Mark Carney, who's the prime minister, is much more of a globalist, just the opposite of what certainly Donald Trump is. And if you've ever been around Donald Trump, and I have not, but many people have, he spends, even before he became president, spent a fair amount of time talking about how other countries are taking advantage of us. And certainly China is one of those. But Canada, he has always felt, was another. So the editors of National Review said this was a pointless trade war with Canada. And at a time right now when we've got a war in Ukraine, we have a war in Iran, we have all sorts of really significant threats around the world, I'm not sure I would pick a battle with Canada right now, but then again, I'm not the president, and he is. And so in some respects, let me give you the negative, and then I'll give you some of the background that sometimes isn't covered. He said, the editors of National Review said, look, the U.S. to be in the middle of a poisonous brawl with Canada takes a degree of foolhardiness that would once been inconceivable. They point out that, of course, the president doesn't help himself when he jokes about Canada being the 51st state, but nevertheless, this gets into the fact that this latest battle between Washington and Ottawa is one that is triggered by the administration retaliating against Canadian retaliation. So you can blame both sides on this, by the way, if you want to be honest about this, about earlier U.S. tariffs and some of the insults. And of course, as you might have noticed, the president wants to rename one of the Great Lakes to Lake America. It's just the things that he wants to do. But nevertheless, Trump has given Carney and Ottawa, the Canadian government, a deadline to come up with a deal covering various disputed areas in order to avoid tariffs on about $20 billion of goods. Despite the two sides repeatedly coming close to an agreement, they missed the deadline. Of course, blamed each other. And again, I can put blame on both sides on this one. But as is often the case, they say tariffs will inflict economic damage on both sides of the border. And in many cases, you will end up paying for some of those, as we've talked about before with Dr. Merrill Matthews. But the geopolitical consequences might be more serious in an age right now where we're dealing with some real problems with supply chains. Just mentioned the Strait of Hormuz a minute ago, and there are others. It certainly makes sense right now to have the North American bloc. Even if we can't get Mexico to cooperate, can't we at least get the United States and Canada to agree at this time? And as, of course, the Prime Minister, Mark Carney, points out, Canada supplies, are you ready for this? I was unaware of this. 99% of all the U.S. natural gas imports, 85% of its electricity imports, and 60% of its crude oil imports. So there are some things at stake there as well. On the other hand, let me give you the other side. This comes from Scott McKay. You can find that piece as well. He calls it Mark Carney's Smuggler's Blues, because what we are saying right now, and what he's saying in particular, is that some of these tariffs by the president are not an act of aggression, but the predictable consequence of negotiation in which one side has finally stopped accepting these asymmetric terms that they've tolerated for years. What do we mean by that? The asymmetry is this. Canadian dairy tariffs on U.S. products have run well over 200% under the country's supply management regime, even as Canadian goods flow south with almost no friction. The example I use, and I'm going to use it again when I get to Wisconsin next time, is you can think of people that are dairy farmers in Wisconsin making cheese, and if they want to sell the cheese literally over the border, there are some places in Wisconsin where you can almost see the Canadian border if you drive far enough north, and yet they would have to then face 200% tariffs on cheese that they would want to sell to Canadians simply because it's over the border. And you can see that if you start recognizing that in many cases, whether it's lumber or other dairy products or all sorts of manufactured goods from Canada, they flow pretty easily to the United States without the kind of tariffs that did not exist until Donald Trump decided to pick a fight with them. So, of course, where we find ourselves right now is what is happening in Canada. But this particular article also recognizes that when you talk about Canada, you also have to talk about China. And that is the previous prime minister probably was cozied up to China. And in some cases, Canada has become almost a transshipment hub for some of these Chinese products that then make their way into the United States, again, without tariffs. So once you start looking at this issue, it's like looking at a chessboard. If you want to play good chess, my brother was very good at chess. I'm not. But I know enough to know that you have to look at the whole board. And so when we were looking at what was happening in Venezuela, we recognize the impact that has on China. When we're looking at what's happening in Iran, that has an impact on China. And even when we look at something like Canada, there is the connection to China as well. And so some of these illegal transshipments of goods, which have gone through third world countries, including China, are an attempt by China and others to avoid the kind of tariffs that Trump has been concerned about. So there is more to the story, but I wanted you to know that in many cases, this might not have been the best particular issue to pick a fight on right now, but there's where we are. And, we'll talk about it probably this weekend on our Friday weekend edition. But just before we wind down, I thought I would also if nothing else, encourage you to pray for Dennis Prager. He's been in the studio with us before. As a matter of fact, he's so tall he hit some of the lights in the studio here. And also, he has been by phone, but as you may know, he has been injured and is quite paralyzed. But he's still got an active mind. And the other day, I think they decided to go and find one of his columns. By the way, you might even wish him happy birthday. Understand that on August 2nd, he turned 78. And so, again, this column actually came out years ago, but it was entitled Immigrants Change Cultures, Whether New Yorkers in Florida or Latinos in America. And it's very appropriate because one of the commentaries that I've done has been on this issue of immigration. One of our booklets is on immigration, and a future booklet that I'm finishing off right now is on the weaponization of institutions, and one section of that has to do with the weaponization of immigration. And so he points out that oftentimes we are referring to the United States as a nation of immigrants. And he says the statement sounds meaningful, but in reality it's meaningless. Because recognize that, yeah, everybody came here from some other country. And he then points out Howard Zinn, who you might remember we quoted yesterday, author of The People's History of the United States, a Marxist historian, even told Dennis Prager one time in one of their interviews that the world would probably be better off if there was never a United States of America. That's pretty strong. But nevertheless, again, the problem with this issue of immigration is, should there be any limits? And he said the problem is the people on the left don't think there should be any limits. And yet everyone else, conservatives, independents, and at least typical liberals say, well, no, we believe in borders, not because we're xenophobic, not because we hate people, but because we recognize that if nothing else, we need to be careful, because if you bring vast majorities of people into this country, in many cases, they change your values. They don't accept the American values. And especially when some who come here never plan to assimilate and instead really bring their culture here and have more allegiance to their culture or their country than they do to the United States. That is the problem. So this is a very good piece in which he reminds us this is also true here. There are New Yorkers that have immigrated to Florida. There are people from California that have gone to Arizona or to Texas. And in some respects, we already understand that. And he, I think, uses just some of the examples that we've seen in our own country to illustrate why we have borders and why we recognize that immigration needs to be managed, and people who come here legally and want to be Americans and accept American values are the people we want to welcome. But people who come here who hate this country and actually never intend to assimilate, that's the question. So that's all we have for this half hour. When we come back, we're going to talk about our great ministry of Fellowship of Christian Athletes. That coming up right after this.
Many years ago, they began saying that we live in the information age. Well, today there is so much information coming at us from every direction. The hardest thing is to discern which issues are really important and how can I make a positive impact without wasting my time trying to figure out accurate information. Let me give you a suggestion to help with that. Visit pointofview.net, look at the tabs across the top, find the one named Viewpoints. Kerby Anderson and others on our team are constantly watching for news to identify those issues that you really need to know about. They boil things down in a brief summary, and then you can decide if it's something on which you want to learn more and get involved. Again, when you go to pointofview.net, click on Viewpoints, you'll see exactly what I mean. You'll see the issues that we are covering right now. And when you like what you see, I honestly think you will, you can slide on over, enter your email, and get them automatically sent to your inbox each day. That's it. Take a minute now, be informed. Pointofview.net, click on Viewpoints. Point of View will continue after this. You are listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again is Kerby Anderson.
Back once again, we're going to talk about our good friends at the Fellowship of Christian Athletes. First of all, let me hold up this. This is the September issue of Outlook. And for those of you that are watching online, you can see what that looks like. For those of you that are donors to Point of View, you will receive this in your mailbox. Many of you probably all have received it. And it's kind of the back-to-school issue where we spend some time talking about everything from grade inflation to the miseducation of America to what has happened in the public schools and a variety of others. And one aspect of that, of course, is if you have young people that are interested in athletics, one of the best outreaches that you can possibly find would be FCA, which is Fellowship of Christian Athletes. So I thought, first of all, we might talk about how you can connect up with that, and you will find some links that we've already established on our website at pointofview.net. In particular, we have a link to the Chicagoland FCA because we're going to be talking with the individual who actually is the executive director there, but you can follow from there to find out if there's an FCA chapter in your community, and I'm sure there is. If not, you might find out about starting one. But also I do want to talk about what's going on in their new work in the Netherlands, because if you've been paying attention, we certainly had a number of people that came down here to Dallas from the Netherlands because they were watching the World Cup, and it was fun to interact with some of them. It's also interesting to see how much they loved everything from Texas barbecue to Buc-ee's to a variety of other things. So there's a lot of fun stories there as well. So let's, if we can, go to Deneé Barracato, who is, again, the executive director of the Chicagoland FCA, which is an outreach to over 9 million residents and really the third largest media market. She has worked at the NCAA, and also at Northwestern University. And, of course, this is a regional branch of the Fellowship of Christian Athletes. Organization started, I guess, back 1954 to use sports as a platform for sharing the message of Jesus Christ. Deneé, thank you for joining us today here on Point of View.
Thank you, Kerby. Really excited to be joining you and your audience today.
Well, again, I know a lot about FCA. As a matter of fact, I start my day at Probe and at the Hope Center. When we were downsizing a little bit, we put in FCA in one of the building sections we were part of. Then later on, when we decided to downsize, FCA moved out and I moved into their headquarters. So I've had a close affinity, gone to many FCA events. But for people that are unfamiliar with Fellowship of Christian Athletes, can you give us an overview?
Yes, of course. Well, that's exciting for you. I'm excited that you're familiar with FCA, and that's one of the things that we're trying to really educate people here in Chicagoland. FCA was founded in 1954. That stands for Fellowship of Christian Athletes, and our mission is to lead every coach and athlete into a growing relationship with Jesus Christ and His church. And we do that through the power of sport, coaches, and athletes, and hopefully allowing them to see that they're more than just their sport, and that Christ loves them as they are. And if they were to just really find their identity in Christ, that they can play for Him, whether or not the sport is there or not. If it ends for whatever reason, like our friends in the Netherlands who experienced some heartbreak, we want them to understand that they're more than just their sport. So our ministry just walks alongside coaches and athletes in discipleship, and helping them see that their worth is in Christ and not in their sport in particular.
Let's talk about, too, the value of getting them off the streets and into sports. My producer, Derek, dug up some of these numbers. You talked to him a minute ago when he called you. Found out just in Chicago alone that carjackings, 49%, almost half, are youth under the age of 17. Robberies represent about a third of all the robberies under the age of 17 as well. When you look at the number of individuals who are engaged in what you might call repeat offenses, over two-thirds 2/3 of those that had a prior offense. It does seem to me that if we can get young people off the streets and in organized sports, there are so many things that can happen in a positive way in terms of team leadership skills and keeping them away from all the kinds of dangerous activities that are going to end up bringing them to jail and maybe even to prison.
Absolutely. In my life in sports, I believe that sports is probably one of the top 3 things that really brings people together. It defies lines of socioeconomic differences, gender, ethnicity, and culture. It's one of these things that bring people together in such an amazing way that, to your point, can take them away from the things that maybe society deems them to be, whether poverty or drugs or crime. It gives them another outlet to pursue something that maybe they thought was never in the cards for them. And so using sport in that way, it allows them to meet other individuals, encourages them to really focus on their character development and all the things that can help them through life, not only through school, but even through their adulthood. And so all those important pieces of learning and developing as a person, but more so, again, what we teach them is finding those things through Christ and his love and working with people in community will certainly, in our opinion, help to transform their lives and develop them as a productive person in society. And as you mentioned, here in Chicago, unfortunately, in some of the toughest areas, the south side of Chicago, west side of Chicago, we even see that in Chicago, under the age of 18, 1 in every 4 individuals are growing up in poverty. And that's according to a Better Chicago, a State of Youth report. But that is staggering in the 3rd largest media market in Chicago. And, those are some areas that we're really focusing on to share the goodness of Christ and help them understand that they're more than just their circumstance. And through sport, perhaps they can find a better path in life.
Let's, if we can, talk about what's going on in the Netherlands for just a minute. And then a little bit later, we'll talk about how individuals maybe can get their children or grandchildren involved with you. But you have this opportunity through, I think I'm pronouncing his name correctly, Matthew Tendam, who is an incredible athlete. And to have somebody of his stature in the athletic world to then be one of the key people that you can begin to develop and implement the FCA program in the Netherlands, I think is pretty exciting.
Yeah, no, we're really proud of our international colleagues. So much to be said about the work that we're doing internationally. For those of you that may not know, FCA is present in over 100 countries, including the domestic U.S., but a lot of kingdom building being had and being done, not only in the Netherlands, but many other countries throughout. So we're so excited about Matthew and the work that he's doing through basketball and the work that he's doing throughout his community to just bring awareness. And so FCA Europe is, just thriving. And we're still really excited that the gospel of Jesus Christ is being shared beyond just the domestic U.S.
So again, we do have some information about that you can follow. And of course, you can go to just fca.org for the general organization. But as I just mentioned a minute ago, for those of you that happen to be in the Illinois area, the Chicagoland FCA.org is on the website as well. Let's, if we can, for a few minutes, Deneé, talk about how to get involved, because the key, I find most of the time, is if you can just get one of these athletes to what is called a huddle, that kind of begins the story. They then hear some of the testimonies, they go through some Bible study, but the entry point seems to be the huddles, isn't it? But explain if you might.
Yes, I mean, the foundational ministry of FCA, yes, is through huddles, and huddles is a fancy word for Bible studies, but it's also an opportunity for students and coaches to connect for mentorship, leadership development, and just community building. And it's a great opportunity for them to meet on campus at their school, whether they're in middle school or high school or even beyond. We have many huddles that take place even on the collegiate level and the professional level. So that is the entry point. If there's interest in starting a huddle at your local school, whether here in Chicagoland or throughout the domestic U.S., just reach out to a coach that you trust and that you think would support you. And then from that point, every school district has their different regulations on how to start one. But we're happy as a staff to support with materials, curriculum, even food, right? Students love to come together for food and pizza and all those different type of things. And it just gives them an environment in which there's like-minded individuals that want to see each other progress and want to cheer each other on through sport.
Let's take a break, and we'll come back. I do want to talk about the camps, and even we might have some coaches listening and talk about the way parents, coaches, teachers, everyone can connect up with you. But we have one of those mandatory breaks. This would be a good time for you to go, for example, just to fca.org to find out about the FCA. Of course, we also have the one to the Chicagoland FCA.org as well if you'd like to know more about what is happening there. We'll be right back.
You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Back for a few more minutes with Deneé Barracato, who again is the Executive Director of the Chicagoland FCA. If you go there, you can see a map, and it will show you the various counties there. And if you happen to be in one of those, and I do know we broadcast in Illinois, of course we broadcast all over the country, these would be some opportunities for you to connect up. Or even if you're not in that area, would like to know more, one of the things I would encourage Deneé to maybe have people do is to click on the button that says to get involved, because we talked about the one entry level, and that is the huddles. The good news is there is small group curricula, there are Bible studies, there are devotional material. It's plug and play. You don't even have to create all of that. You have done such an outstanding job of putting that together. But I thought we'd talk about two other areas in which people can get involved, and that is, in addition to the day-to-day activity on a campus, there are these FCA camps, and I've heard great stories of young people that have gone out to a camp, because think about this, at a huddle, maybe you get a few minutes with them, maybe even an hour, but in a camp, you get an entire weekend, sometimes you get an entire week, you get all sorts of opportunities for discipleship and mentoring, and so another way to get involved is through camps, isn't it?
Absolutely. Camps is such a great outlet for families and the individual athlete and even coaches. During this summer of 2026, FCA camps brought together over 61,000 attendees over the country. And that's amazing to see the lives that we were able to share the gospel with. And it's also a fun time just in sports, right? Whatever your sport is, whether it's football, basketball, golf, swimming, there's something for everyone. This year in Illinois, we partnered with our friends throughout the state of Illinois and hosted a proving camp at Dubuque University. And it was a great opportunity that even my son attended, and he said it was the best experience of his adolescent life, and he's 12. So that's a lot to be said about that sports camp. So yeah, just a great opportunity for athletes and coaches to get together, not only in sport, but also in Christ.
And again, I've said before that things happen in these Christian camps that happen almost nowhere else. And part of it is because you have the chance to really focus on them, to pour your life into them, to disconnect them from the digital media and all the other distractions. So don't ignore that issue. So we've talked about huddles, talked about camps. Let's talk about coaches for just a minute. I suspect right now we may have some coaches listening, but more importantly, many of you know coaches. They have been coaches for your kids, for your grandkids. Maybe they're coaches in your church, and they sometimes feel very isolated. And that's another outreach and ministry that you have, isn't it?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I'd like to say that we not only have coaches, but we have Olympic caliber coaches and world-class coaches who are believers, who want to work with us, who want to mentor athletes like those here in Chicagoland, but throughout the entire country. And actually just last week, we hosted a one-day clinic with our partner Beat the Streets here in Chicago, where head coach and coach of the year in the Big Ten, Mark Manning, came down along with assistant coach BJ Futrell here at Northwestern in the sport of wrestling. And they spent an entire day with athletes throughout Chicago, just pouring into them from a fundamental wrestling perspective, but also sharing their testimony and their relationship with Christ and how that can bring them through excellence through sport, but also character development. So coaches, as you know, spend a ton of time with athletes and, really serve in many cases as parents and mentors when they're not with their families. So coaches have a very important part to play, and we're just so excited that we have not just coaches, but, Olympic caliber coaches that want to pour back into the athletes that we serve.
Very impressive. Let me mention that there's a place, of course, where you can click on the button that says Get Involved, but let me also talk about how people can support you in prayer and financial support. One of the individuals that has been a key supporter here for the radio show Point of View became a Christian through FCA, and I've gone with him to many of the FCA events. Now, I'm not a golfer, so I don't go to the FCA golf tournaments, but everything else, all the banquets and lunches, things like that, I've gone with him over the years. And again, it's just a good illustration of the fact that he really just has two organizations he gives significantly to, maybe a few others, but two that I know of, FCA and, of course, Point of View. And I think it illustrates again that this is an outreach, and you can reach young people in ways that maybe the church has not been as effective reaching out to. And so, again, I hope people will find out more about what it would mean to support you. And again, I am well aware of, I think he, if not he, certainly a lot of his friends serve on the board, because in some of these local FCA, you need people not only that are financially supportive of the organization, but can provide direction and guidance and things of that nature, help coordinate the events. So there's a whole infrastructure. And if people for the first time are learning about FCA, let me just encourage you to go to fca.org, or you can, of course, find the one about Chicagoland if you happen to be in the Illinois area. And that is what we wanted to talk about, because as I hold up our September magazine on back to school, we certainly want to encourage teachers and students as they go back to school, wherever that might be. But we also recognize that one of the most effective outreaches I've seen is through Fellowship of Christian Athletes, which is why we had you come on the program today.
Yeah, absolutely. We're 100% donor supported, and we rely on our partners throughout this ministry to support staff, but also to support the programming, to support Bible distribution, to support the different resources that we not only give to our coaches and our huddle leaders, but also, to your point, in prayer as well, which is, we know, the greater work. So prayer is number one. Please pray for us. If you'd like to get involved, there's voluntary opportunities to be a coach or an ambassador, and also, obviously, with gifts of giving. If that is your gift, we would love for you to visit us and, seek out the donation now. Certainly, we will be blessed by anyone that wants to contribute to the work that we're doing. And I would be remiss in not mentioning FCA sports, leagues, and clubs, which we're really trying to emphasize here in Chicagoland. Again, we know the work that's being done on campuses through huddles, but we know now through the paradigm shift of sports in general, where families are being pulled from maybe church or youth group on the weekends to tournaments and other opportunities to play sports through tournaments and leagues. And we believe that we need to be where they are. So FCA Sports is, a different branch, not a different branch, but an extension of FCA Huddles, where we bring sport mentorship and discipleship to the athletes and coaches where they are on the weekend. So that's something that we'd ask for, just financial support and prayer as we look to expand that throughout all of Chicagoland.
Well, I appreciate you joining us with us today here on Point of View. And again, any information you would like to get, it's on the website, pointofview.net, has some of the links to fca.org. Let's take a break. When we come back, next hour, we're going to get into Iran. That's in the news right now. Yesterday, of course, we talked about that in one particular way. We're going to be talking with Dr. Hormoz Shariat. He's with Iran Alive Ministries. If you're not familiar, he's an individual that has been very much involved in broadcasting into into Iran. And the Iranian regime, no surprise there, recently blacklisted several Christian satellite television ministries. This is one of those. And so I thought you would like to know sort of what they are dealing with right now, what is going on in Iran, how you can pray for that as well in light of some of the things we started the conversation about in terms of the fact that, of course, we have this operation, if you will, D-Day, economic D-Day right now with Iran. So we're going to come back and talk about that. Just before we do so, let me mention that my commentary is there. The information about our guest is there as well. And, of course, our action item, all available at the website pointofview.net. Let's take a break. We'll come back in our second hour right after this.
There are so many big stories happening literally everywhere. So much information, documents released, grand jury testimony, political accusations and claims on all sides. How in the world can any of us keep up? How do we weed out the truly important from the merely sensational? None of us can do it alone. I've been in media for more than 45 years. I've trained my skills, and yet even with that, I am glad for the more than 50-year track record of the team here at Point of View. They help us to cut through the noise and focus on the authentically important. More than that, biblically informed eyes to help us understand and develop ways to respond effectively. Providing what we need takes time and resources, and your partnership makes it all possible. Click on into pointofview.net, hit the donate button, or call 1-800-347-5151. Please give today. Better, sign up and help monthly. Pointofview.net and 1-800-347-5151. Point of View will continue after this. Across America, live, this is Point of View. And now, Kerby Anderson.
Second hour today, we're going to spend some time, as you might imagine, talking about Iran. We did that yesterday, and even at the start of the program today, mentioned again something we talked about in some detail, and that is the Treasury Secretary for the United States, Scott Bessent, has announced Operation Economic Outcast, or what many have referred to as an economic D-Day against Iran. Very sad for the impact that is probably having on many of the 90 million Iranians who didn't ask for this, but are led by a corrupt leadership that will not step down. So, as always, we wanted to give you a perspective of hope and of encouragement, and couldn't think of a better way to do that than to go back to our frequent guest, Dr. Hormoz Shariat, who is with Iran Alive Ministries. They use modern technology to share the gospel, to train believers, and to actually fuel a discipleship-making movement. They are using, of course, satellite broadcasting, the internet, and really helping reach Iranians with the gospel. He is, of course, an Iranian Muslim convert, has his PhD, by the way, in artificial intelligence from the University of Southern California. He's been on all sorts of different TV programs, but has been on with us on a number of occasions. And as I mentioned last hour, and we will get into this, the Iranian regime recently blacklisted several of these television ministries, including his, and so we'll get into it. So, Dr. Shariat, once again, welcome back to Point of View. Yeah, we'll see if we can get him up. Do we have him? Or are we? So, Dr. Shariat, are you there?
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Kerby, for having me. I had it on mute. So, nice talking to you, and the great things are happening, and we need to have God's point of view on everything.
Well, again, I want to get your point of view on that for sure. But let's again just remind people of the fact that you have been using this technology for some time, broadcasting the gospel 24/7 all over the Middle East. You've been pastoring online church with probably 1 million Iranians. You've been training leaders, but give us the full orb of what you are involved with, because it is pretty amazing what you have been able to develop and how you've been able to reach out across this barrier between us and the Iranians.
Well, as you may know, there is a revival going on in Iran, and God's Spirit is working in Iran and setting people free from the spirit of Islam. That's an amazing historical moment, because an Islamic nation by name has rejected Islam by millions, and they're open to the gospel. This is a fertile ground for the gospel. So we have amazing results, and I'm not proud of it because God did it, but we have thousands of people coming to Christ through us every month. But it's because the ground is so ready, and whatever you sow, you see the results. I share the gospel, the simplest version of the gospel. Sometimes I'm preaching on our channel, and I just take a break in the middle of my sermon, which is addressed to Christians. I take a break and I give a 2-minute version of the gospel. And you know what? Muslims come to Christ. They only need a 2-minute version. So this is a history in the making, and we should not be shocked or amazed because we know the end result. How do we know the end result? It's written. I say Iran will be a Christian nation, and people say, are you crazy? Where'd you get that? You just Google it. It's 98%. I said, it will be, and it's already moving in that direction. They say, where did you get that idea? And I tell them, Kerby, I stole that idea. You stole that idea? Where did you steal it from? I stole it from Jeremiah 49, verse 38.
Yes.
God promises salvation of Iran in the future.
Yes. And I would encourage people to look that up. It's something you've mentioned, and of course, Joel Rosenberg and others have mentioned it as well. If people go to your website, and we do have a link there, one of the things it talks about is from compassion to Christ. When crisis strikes, compassion opens hearts to Christ. And right now, Iran is facing just a terrible economic collapse, 2 million rial for $1. And so the economic collapse, the social collapse, families lost their jobs. You are not only broadcasting, but you're finding ways to get food and medicine to them. Can you talk about that for a minute?
Yeah, we have a campaign, and many brothers and sisters in the West, in America, they have the heart for their brothers and sisters in Iran, and that's just God. We have to have a heart for one another, for the church. The underground church in Iran is suffering. Leaders are suffering. So the last few months, we've been having a campaign to help the families in Iran who are, because of economy and the government, many families don't even can afford basic necessities. Just forget about meat, forget about eggs, just the rice, just the bread. Some of them cannot even afford it. So because of the help of the friends, we have been able to help right now over 600 families. We have been able to help, starting with Christians, but not limited to Christians. When we ask, and this is kind of interesting. When we tell our Christian leaders in Iran, okay, we're going to help you on the behalf of your brothers and sisters in America. They give us, so we give you. We're going to help you for 2 or 3 months of groceries, but there is one condition. The condition is this: 10 to 20% of what we give you, you have to buy groceries and go out and give it to Muslims in the name of Jesus. And they do it, and we receive so many testimonies of people coming to Christ because now they see the love of God in action. So we see not only helping our brothers and sisters, but evangelism. They're helping evangelism in Iran through these hard times. Yeah, we have a way to send money to Iran. I cannot divulge that, but we've done it, and with the help to help the people, and we are helping, and we are hoping to help to 2,000 families in the next few weeks. We are up to 600 level.
Well, again, I just am very impressed with that. And of course, we have a link there. So just again, put some of this in perspective. Inflation is exploding. I mean, just imagine the Iranian rial is worth virtually nothing. You've had, of course, protests in the streets, and that has been met with violence. Many families just simply have no income. Again, even the oil revenue going to the IRGC, which stands for the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, is basically zero now, and that is the case. So you're dealing with people, hunger, trauma, fear, and you're bringing a message of hope. So when I come back from the break, I want to talk a little bit about what we can do collectively and then individually. I'd love to have you share some of your stories because, if nothing else, I think it is just a very creative idea to not only minister to the individuals who are Christians in that community, but then to encourage them and admonish them to go out there and share some of their food and their resources with other Muslims. And they oftentimes just say, "Why are you doing that? I'm not even a fellow Christian. And you're being so nice to me." And that, of course, opens up the opportunity for the gospel. So we're going to come back and talk a little bit more about that. If you want to know more about this organization, of course, we have a picture of Dr. Hormoz Shariat. We also have a link to iranalive.org. You can go there directly. Or, of course, we have the link there as well. As you go there, you'll see some great material. There's a video to watch. There's a whole calculation of the number of salvations. Very impressive. We'll continue our conversation right after this.
This is Viewpoints with Kerby Anderson.
Yesterday, I talked about how Gen Z investors see sports gambling as their long-term financial strategy. While that might seem irrational, they are making choices about how to provide for their financial future based upon some sobering economic facts. Let's discuss a few of them. Last month, the official percentage for inflation was higher than the percentage for wage growth. Put another way, prices rose faster than your paycheck. This wasn't the exception, but the rule. Since the 1970s, when the U.S. went off the gold standard, prices of everything have risen faster than wages. The national debt increased by $2.8 trillion last year. Someone calculated that works out to be $91,000 per second. Put another way, the national debt just increased another $8 million in the time you listen to this commentary, and I should add that the national debt is about $40 trillion. To illustrate this to one of my guests on radio, I suggested we remove 8 zeros from these numbers. The federal government brings in $5 trillion each year and spends $7 trillion during the same amount of time. Imagine if somebody is making $50,000 and spending $70,000 each year, we would be concerned, especially if that person also had $400,000 in debt. To finance this budgetary shortfall, the government must print enough money to cover the difference. More dollars dropped into the economy means it takes more dollars to buy assets, but it also means the dollars in your wallet or purse are worth less. That results in what is called a K-shaped economy. The stock market is at an all-time high when most Americans struggle to make ends meet. I'm Kerby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
Go deeper on topics like you just heard by visiting pointofview.net. That's pointofview.net. You're listening to Point of View. your listener-supported source for truth.
Back once again, we're talking, of course, about the outreach to almost 90 million people in Iran, and a broadcast that is 24/7 in Farsi, which provides a great opportunity to begin to have an outreach to these individuals and these communities. And one of the things I thought we might talk about for just a minute, Dr. Shariat, is that you're getting the attention of the Iranian regime because they have blacklisted a number of Christian satellite television ministries because they, in one way or another, are bringing what they say is a threat to the Iranian regime. But really what you're bringing is the gospel. So what is the status of that particular blacklisting that has taken place?
Well, they have done another step I'm going to share. Yeah, I heard that just a few weeks ago. You know what I did? I went to our staff and I started saying, hey, congratulations for the victory. We are on the government's blacklist. So it shows that we are effective and that we are impacting Iran. And that's why the government of Iran is not happy, but we are happy. But they went a step further. The government of Iran, they just passed a law, written law, that those who work for us, including me, and those who support us, not just financially, but those who come on our channel for interviews, they are criminals. They passed the law. So I'm officially a criminal right now, according to the government of Iran. And in the past, they would arrest and they bring other charges. Hey, you're a CIA agent or you're a drug dealer. Some of the leaders were killed, not under accusation of being a Christian, but other accusations like being a spy. But now with this new law, they don't need to do that to bring the wrong accusation. They just bring out the law. According to the law, you are broadcasting Christian content and you are a criminal. And anybody helping you is a criminal. So I thank God for all the criminals in the U.S. for helping us do this.
Well, again, we can make light of it, but it is serious for the people that are there because, as you have pointed out, and let's get into this, Iran really has the fastest growing evangelical community in the world. It is the fastest growing church by percentage. And part of that is due to what you are doing because you have been able to reach an average, if I've got the numbers right, 6 million Farsi-speaking Iranians daily. They can turn on their TV set. They can see this and hear that. More than 100,000 Bibles, more than 120,000 documented decisions, and thousands and thousands of students enrolled in your online equipping school. So if we can, let's go through each one of those because these decisions are ones that are documented, if for no other reason, because they tell you that. And again, it's a very significant threat if you convert out of Islam to Christianity, but yet they are quite willing to do so and even acknowledge that they are now a new Christian growing in their faith.
That's what's happening. Islam is coming to U.S. Let me start with that. But when we have produced a documentary talking about it, and go look at it. And people think we are just producing hatred towards Muslims in America or fear. No. That's not what we are doing. We are bringing awareness. I was a Muslim background, and many of us coming from Islamic background, we know what Islam is and what their plans are for America. And sometimes I see the Iranians are more aware of Islam than Americans who can just do a study on their own, just study Quran, study Bible, study and research. So what God is doing through Muslim background believers like me, it's not just in Middle East, but we feel that we owe it to Americans that we bring this awareness, not the hatred, not the fear of Muslims, but the awareness. So what we can do is political activism, yes, but mostly spiritual activism, sharing the love of Christ with Muslims in America. That's the response. So here it is. A Muslim is being defeated in the Middle East in many ways, and especially in Iran, but it's growing in West. And as you know, in Europe, there are many nations that are struggling with Muslims. They just give them the ground, and now they're taking over. They're doing an Islamic Sharia law, and Sharia courts are coming to U.S. And people say, "What do you think about it?" I said, "Well, they can kill me according to Sharia law. I'm becoming a Christian. They can kill me, and they will get points for heaven. So, do you want Sharia law in America? On the surface, it looks good, but when they have it, and they have it in some of the countries in Europe, and you see the disaster of having Sharia courts in America. So our goal is Middle East. God is doing something else. And now, Kerby, I'm more worried about America than Iran right now.
Well, let's talk about that for just a minute, because I figured that would be someplace where we'd go. First of all, I'll hold up my booklet on a biblical view on Islam. And for those of you that say, well, I'm probably not going to read a book on Islam, but I'd like to know more about my Muslim friends. And of course, you can get some great material from a good friends there, as well as Iran Alive. That gives you some ideas on how to witness to them. And then here's my booklet on Sharia law. And Dr. Shariat, one of the reasons I did that, of course, I did one years ago on Sharia law, is, as well as I do, that just down the road from where this broadcast is taking place, there was an emphasis on having an epic city and really trying to have a, if you will, almost kind of a community or a commune that would actually be a 40-acre project, which would be Muslim run. And as you have just pointed out, there are some real concerns about the fact that Islam is not just in the Middle East. It is certainly coming to the United States. And if you want to understand what it would be like when Muslim ideas begin to take over, look at what has happened in the UK, in France, in the Netherlands, and places like that. So you have a real concern as well, not only focused on what is happening over in the Middle East, but you're also concerned about what's happening here in the community where you are.
That's correct. And it's all out of love for America. I wrote an article for Fox News last year, 5 reasons I love America. But it's not just love for America, but love for Muslims. People think if we are talking about Islam, we are Muslim haters. No, we are not. And sometimes you just recite a Quranic verse and people call you Islamic phobic. I think, come on. I'm just reciting a Quranic verse. I love Muslims. I've given my life to Muslims. So you don't have to hate Muslims. Don't be afraid of them, because the spirit that is in us is stronger than the dark spirit of Islam. And if we just be Christians, if we just share the hope, the gospel, if we just be the light, darkness has no way to defeat us, has no way. And we can shine the light in the Middle East, yes, but let's do it in America too.
Well, again, one of the concerns that I think we even talked about yesterday with Lana Silk, she wrote this piece about don't ignore radical Islam in America. And it does seem to me that we need to not only present the gospel in Iran, but we need to educate Americans, because I think a lot of individuals say, well, I know a Muslim friend, neighbor, coworker, but I really don't know much about Islam, and I don't really know what radical Muslims want to achieve. So we've got an educational problem here in the United States, don't we?
Correct. And that's why we produced a documentary. And I encourage your viewers and listeners to watch it, a documentary called The Great American Conflict, The Great American Conflict. And we have several trained speakers. We have not just me, and I have a couple more that one lived in Europe and saw firsthand what happened in Europe. They speak at churches, bring awareness, and even do training, Muslim evangelism training or general training. And they are busy. They're busy interviewing, and they're busy visiting churches. And maybe they can serve your church if you're listening and you're concerned about America. I encourage you, step number one, become aware. Don't be naive. The Muslims in the Middle East, one thing they say about Americans, I'm sorry to say that, number one thing that Muslims in America say about Americans, they are so naive. So let's not be naive. They have a long-term plan for America. And if you watch, and it's not just a speculation. Look at what, as you mentioned, look at Europe. This is not a guess. This is not a speculation. This is a plan. And they have done it in Europe, and they are trying to do it in America. Did you know in DFW area, in over 2 years, in the last 2 years, they have started 50 mosques.
Yes.
And who paid for it? Oil money paid for it in the Middle East. So,
yeah, we're going to take a break, and we'll come back. I want to give you some more information about that film, The Great American Conflict, a film about Islam, freedom, and America. Get something to write with, and we will talk more about that right after this.
At Point of View, we believe there is power in prayer, and that is why we have relaunched our Pray for America campaign, a series of weekly emails to unite Americans in prayer for our nation. Imagine if hundreds of thousands of Americans started praying intentionally together on a weekly basis. You can help make that a reality by subscribing to our Pray for America emails. Just go to pointofview.net and click on the Pray for America banner that's right there on the homepage. Each week you'll receive a brief news update, a specific prayer guide, and a free resource to equip you in further action. We encourage you to not only pray with us each week, but to share these prayers and the resources with others in your life. Join the movement today. Visit pointofview.net and click on the banner Pray for America right there at the top. That's pointofview.net. Let's pray together for God to make a difference in our land. Point of View will continue after this. You are listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again is Kerby Anderson.
Back once again, if you would like to get some more information, let me give you a couple of places where you can find it. First of all, if you go to our own website, pointofview.net, I just went there and used the search engine, and how many articles do we have, viewpoints, commentaries on it? Well, it was more than 100 on the subject of Islam. How many on Sharia law? More than a dozen as well. So lots of things that are already there, free of charge, commentaries that I've done, viewpoints, commentaries. One that I will point you to is the one I did August 12th, which had the title Islam and Christianity. And this was an attempt to respond to this argument that was made on Tucker Carlson's program that relations between Islam and Christian world were peaceful for 500 years. What I did was basically point you to a very good commentary by John Stonestreet and Glenn Sunshine, their Breakpoint commentary, in which we, of course, counter that idea that is false. And so you can find lots of resources on our website. But then if you go to Iran Alive, and I would encourage you to do so, there is the film, and it's called The Great American Conflict, and it is a film about Islam, freedom, and America. Now, you might say, well, if I want to get it, can I look at it first? Yes, there's a trailer. The trailer lasts about a minute and a half, and it has individuals, many of whom we've had on this program, Brigitte, Gabriel, and others, for example. And, of course, again, we are talking with Dr. Hormoz Shariat. And so then there's a place where you can get instant access to the film. So this is one that you could watch. It's one that you could download and then present to your Sunday school class or to your community group. And so, Dr. Shariat, there are all sorts of great resources that you've made available at Iran Alive Ministries. And it's really important for us to understand the nature of what we are dealing with, because we recognize God loves Muslims. But at the same time, some of them are trying to work their way to heaven and don't understand the gospel. And then there are radical Muslims who intend to not only persecute Christians and individuals like you that have left Islam, but want to establish a worldwide caliphate over the world. And so we really need to understand what we are dealing with. And that's one of the reasons why I point people to your ministry at Iran Alive Ministries. Can you tell us some more?
Well, I appreciate that. Knowing and awareness is always number one step. And people in the Middle East, especially Iran, they know Islam. They know what Islam is and where it's going and what the methods are, what their strategies. It hasn't changed for the last 1,400 years that Islam exists. The same strategy that Prophet Muhammad used, and now the Caliphate over the years, and now they want to have it back. The same strategy. What is that strategy? Let me give a short awareness. The strategy that was in Quran, and Muhammad did it, and their followers are doing it, this. When you're not in power, be kind. Say Islam is the religion of peace. But when you are in power, then you show them. You show them your power, and you see the belief of Islam is that the whole world should be Muslims or they get killed. This is two options. Either you become a Muslim or you get killed. But you don't hear that in the West. This is a Western version of Islam. Islam, they say, is a religion of peace. And my answer is, look at Prophet Muhammad's life. Was he a prophet of peace? He killed so many. He had so many wars. Look at the followers. Look at the Islamic nations today. Do you see peace there? And by the way, the name Islam, they say it means peace. It doesn't mean peace. It is a military term. Islam and Taslim is a military term. It's when somebody surrenders to another, to a higher power after they're defeated, then they become Muslims or they become subjected to that power. So Islam, even the word does not mean peace, it means surrender. It's kind of like, hey, you do what I tell you and everything will be okay. We'll have peace. It's a surrender. It's a military surrender, that word. And that's what has happened, and that's what gradually is happening in the West. In Europe, they're several years ahead of America. And if we fall asleep, just look at Europe. That's your future. But we should not fall asleep. We should be aware and do what we can, both through politics, but also through sharing the gospel with Muslims. These are two powers we have. They're using the Western law for their advantage. The Western law is based on a goodwill. It's based on Christian values and goodwill. And now they're using that against us. They're saying, hey, we have a right to have a mosque. Of course, you have a right to gather for worship. But this is not a center. The mosque is not where you gather to worship. It's where you gather to plan. I have a friend who came to Christ. He lived in America. He was without Muslims going to mosque, and he came to Christ. And I just was talking to him a couple months ago. You know what he told me? He said, American government and the American people don't even dare to go to mosque and check what they're teaching. He said, I was in a mosque. They were talking about taking over America. He said, in our library in a mosque, we had a library, and we had books about subverting the government of America and bringing revolution, Islamic revolution to America, and how to topple the government. He said, they don't even dare, the American government, they don't even dare to go check their books because they're afraid. They're afraid to be called Islamophobic, and that's you're stepping under civil laws or the rights that they have. So, but these mosques are not just like the church is not the center of just worship. It's the teaching, it's indoctrinating, and it's planning centers.
And again, as you point out, we've had individuals have been on this program that have talked about some of the kind of messages that were given on a Friday in a mosque, some of the kind of information that was there. And you mentioned just a minute ago about this being a military term, because in my commentary, I point out that if you go back and look at the relations between Islam and Christian world, when a Christian area was taken over by Islam, then the individuals, the Christians, were treated as dhimmis, which are like second-class citizens. They were required to pay a number of tax. One, of course, the jizra, which was a tax, but also a sign of submission. And the argument that, well, sometimes they didn't destroy the church as well. Sometimes they didn't because they turned them into mosques. But in many other cases, they were just demolished. And so whether you look at the history from 1400 on, or you look at even what's going on today, say in Nigeria, in other Muslim countries, you can see that presenting Islam as a religion of peace is really pretty difficult to do just in light of the obvious facts. So on the one hand, we should be aware of radical Muslims who read, say, Surah 9, the 9th chapter in the Quran that talks about jihad. But on the other hand, we recognize that most Muslims we're running into are individuals that are just simply trying to find God, but are convinced erroneously that the only way they can find salvation is by trying to fulfill all sorts of works through the 5 pillars of Islam. And so we have to keep kind of both of those in tension. And when we come back from the break, I want to get some final comments from you about how we can reach out to our Muslim neighbors here, what we can do to support your ministry if we're concerned about those individuals who are believers, who are suffering and could be encouraged by food and prayer and financial resources. So again, let me encourage you to go to the website, which is, again, pointofview.net, or you can directly go to iranalive.org/GAC, which stands for the Great American Conflict, if you'd like to see the movie, or if you would like to find out more about how you can support this organization or how you can send resources or pray for individuals in Iran. We have all that information available on our website. And I would encourage you to click on many of the buttons that we have there, because we have, of course, the iranalive.org website. We also, of course, have one for Hormoz Shariat, so you can find both of those particular websites, as well as, of course, links to everything in terms of social media, Facebook, X, Instagram, and the rest. All available at our website at pointofview.net. And if you don't have some of the booklets that we have on Islam and Sharia law, you might let us know. But you will find much of what you need by simply using this search engine in our newly revamped Point of View website. Type in a word like Islam or Sharia law. You'll be amazed at all the resources which we make available to you. We'll take a break, come back with more right after this.
You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Back once again, let me just, as a program note, mention that tomorrow going to spend some time looking at a couple of issues in the news. Very good piece by John Stossel, as well as another one dealing with the issue of Islam. This one comes from Alan Joseph Bauer. And then in the second hour, we're going to be talking about this new film, Beyond Belief. And we're going to talk about some of the people participating in it. And matter of fact, our own Sunday school class will be going to the film on Friday night. And we wanted to let you know more about that film as well. So lots that we will be talking about tomorrow. Of course, Friday is our weekend edition. This week, we spent a little bit more time talking about Iran and Islam. It certainly is in the news, and we wanted you to have as much information as possible. And Dr. Hormoz Shariat, let's, for just a few more minutes, talk about what people can do and how people can connect up with you. I now probably know a little bit more about the Great American Conflict movie. We have a link to that if they would like to find it, and then go to iranalive.org/GAC to get that. But if they go to either your website or the website for Iran Alive, there are ways in which people can participate with you, and talk about those, because these are some great ministry opportunities that people need to know more about.
Well, thank you so much. First of all, we are in North Dallas. Those listeners who are in Dallas, you can even come and visit us in our office and studio in North McKinney. But there are two areas. One is Iran. This is a history in the making, and I always pray God raise up those who are history makers, and they can see that they can transform nations. Iran is so ready for a major transformation, not just political, spiritual. Islam has experienced its greatest defeat in its history in Iran, and Iran will be, if we work together, Iran will be the first Islamic nation that turns to Christ. The Holy Spirit is working. I mean, He's doing the job. All we need to do is align ourselves with what God is doing, and it will happen. Iran, according to Jeremiah 49:38, will be a Christian nation. So let's join together. Join together, not just pray and support, but you may be able to be on our channel. We have it 24/7. We have some pastors that broadcast their teachings and their video resources. They share with us, and we dub it, we translate, and we use it on our channel. So come and not just evangelize the people of Iran, let's disciple them. There's no church in Iran. There's no church in Iran. Even the underground church is just a few. The fastest growing part of our ministry is online church, but still millions have come to Christ. Only a few or tens of thousands or maybe hundreds of thousands are connected to any ministry inside and outside. So this is an opportunity not just to evangelize, but to establish God's church in Iran. And the beautiful thing is this, Kerby, there is no history. The small history of Christianity or a church that in Iran, the government of Iran wiped it out. And now there's fresh start. Whatever we do in Iran will stay for generations. What we tell these new believers, millions of new believers, babies in Christ, hungry for the word of God. And when we teach them what church is, you know what? They receive that. And so we are defining the church of the future in Iran also. Whatever we do for generation, that's what they would think church is. So you can even come and serve with us. We have leadership training. We have leadership conferences outside Iran. Of course, I cannot go to Iran. So we bring some leaders outside and we train them in a third country. And you can be a part of that. So let's do it. Let's make history. I'm calling all the history makers. Hey, this is the time to change the history in the Middle East through Iran.
You've said there's never been a better time and never been a time in history where Iranians have been more desperate and looking for answers. And this is a great opportunity through, again, Iran Alive Ministries. You talked about, of course, people can serve with you. They can pray for you. Of course, they can support you. We, of course, mentioned the movie, The Great American Conflict. Let's talk about a couple others real quickly before I let you go. That is your book, Iran's Great Awakening. I think there's a way in which people, if they go online, can receive a free chapter so that they could learn a little bit more about that. And if they'd like to know a little bit more about what you have said is a prophecy, which is in Jeremiah 49, verse 38. It is, of course, where, again, God says, I will set my throne in Elam, which is basically the older word for Persia, or now what we call Iran, and destroy your king and officials. So there is a real belief, and you hold to that, and certainly a variety of other people like Joel Rosenberg hold to that as well. There is a Christian future for Iran, hard to see today, but if we look at it through the eyes of you and God and of prophecy, we can see that being fulfilled. So, Dr. Hormoz Shariat, it is always great to have you on the program. Thank you for the great work that you're doing, and let me encourage as many of our listeners as possible to connect up with you through the links that we have provided on our website.
Well, God bless you, Kerby. You're doing a great work for the Lord. And let me share one easier way to connect with us. It's just texting a word to a number. It's texting the word Iran, I-R-A-N, to this number, 85789, 85789. If you text Iran to 85789, you get a list of links, and you can click on them, some good testimonies, to a link to our website, to sign up for a newsletter, which I encourage you to be in touch with us. And if the Lord leads you, the link to a donation page. But let's be in touch.
Very good. Again, through text, through website, and a variety of others. And so, again, Dr. Hormoz Shariat with us, and we're winding down for today. But let me just mention real quickly, before we go out of time, that we, again, have some information that you can find on the website. Spent a little bit of time with our friends at Fellowship of Christian Athletes. Good articles from everything from National Review, Wall Street Journal, and the rest. Of course, some very good material that you might want to look at as well on our website. And might also mention, in addition to, of course, those websites and viewpoints that deal with Islam, the one on today deals with our national debt. Yesterday, of course, my commentary talked about the Gen Z investors that saw sports gambling as their long-term financial strategy. Not a good idea. But nevertheless, while that might seem irrational, it is face-to-face with some very sobering economic facts. The fact is that the percentage for inflation has been increasing much faster than the percentage for wage growth. Put another way, prices rose faster than your paycheck. That is not the exception. It has become the rule, especially since the 1970s when we went off the gold standard. So again, the national debt increased by $2.8 trillion, and just in the short time you can hear my commentary, the national debt went up another $8 million. So this illustrates some real significant changes that need to take place. And during these midterm elections, I think those are some very important questions you need to be asking, but also need to be aware of that as well. My commentary today on national debt, I've got one coming out next week on the whole issue of what does a $40 trillion national debt look like, and why, in some respects, as we talked about today, we're dealing with all sorts of trade wars and questions coming from the Treasury Secretary, which we will be getting into later this week here on Point of View. One last time, though, if you want to go to the website, pointofview.net, you will find all the articles we've mentioned. You can go to our recent shows to find some others that we've been talking about. Scroll down, and you will see all of the show materials for the conversations we've had today. Scroll down a little bit further, and you'll find the viewpoints commentaries that we are quoting from as well. That's all we have for today. As always, I want to thank Megan for her help engineering the program. Derek, thank you for producing the program. Look forward to seeing you tomorrow right here on Point of View.
Many years ago, they began saying that we live in the information age. Well, today there is so much information coming at us from every direction. The hardest thing is to discern which issues are really important and how can I make a positive impact without wasting my time trying to figure out accurate information. Let me give you a suggestion to help with that. Visit pointofview.net. Look at the tabs across the top. Find the one named Viewpoints. Kerby Anderson and others on our team are constantly watching for news to identify those issues that you really need to know about. They boil things down in a brief summary, and then you can decide if it's something on which you want to learn more and get involved. Again, when you go to pointofview.net, click on Viewpoints, you'll see exactly what I mean. You'll see the issues that we are covering right now. And when you like what you see, I honestly think you will, you can slide on over, enter your email, and get them automatically sent to your inbox each day. That's it. Take a minute now, be informed. Pointofview.net, click on Viewpoints. Point of View is produced by Point of View Ministries.